Good thinkers, welcome to Good Thinking. Good thinkers from all over the world, welcome to Good Thinking Live. If you are here on LinkedIn, fabulous. If you are here on YouTube Live, also fabulous, but you won't see each other's comments. So I'll try to bring as many of your comments and contributions into the actual live stream as possible. So first of all, you know the drill. Let us know who you are and where you're from, because we're going to get into it. I could probably talk about today's topic for hours and hours on end. I am borrowing just a little bit of few of the nuggets from my LinkedIn learning course, Decision Making in High Stress Situations. But we're going to go adjacent to that today, as we are going to chat about the distinction between high stress or even stress and pressure. And we'll borrow a little from physics to make the distinction and maybe turn some of your concepts of stress and how to deal with stress and all of this stuff upside down, on its head. Okay, so welcome. Let us know who you are and where you're from. I'm going to take this banner off so we have room for your great comments. All right. First question as people are coming on the show: how do you deal or confront stress? Okay, if you had to put one way that you deal or handle stress, how would you describe it? Would you say that you handle it? Would you say that you crush it? Would you say that you succumb to it? Or would you say that you use it? So do you handle it? Do you crush it? Do you succumb to it? Or do you use it? Just a little quick question. Okay, so we've got some good thinkers. We've got some good thinkers on the show. We've got Stephen, who is saying where he's from, which is, let's see if I can scroll, because the scroll is going kind of fast. Greetings from the city whose hockey team used to be named after rodeo cowboys, even though we didn't have any rodeos. And then Kim, welcome Steve. I'm so glad you're here. Of course, Kim, unbeknownst to Stephen, is on, and she is a hockey aficionado, so she knows it's the Buckaroos. Jennifer Felberg is here. I think we've got 3 Portland, Oregoners on the show, which is kind of unusual. And we have, handle. So Stephen says he handles stress. So the first question, in case you're late to the show, is when it comes to stress, how do you describe how you confront it? Do you handle it? Do you crush it? Do you succumb to it? Or do you use it? All right, so Stephen says handle. Patrick, welcome from Atlanta, Georgia. I used to live in Atlanta, love Atlanta. So welcome to the show from Atlanta. And we've got Michael, great thinker, on the show from Toronto, is in the house. All right, so let us know how you would describe how you deal or confront with stress. Jennifer says, I cry, which is actually physiologically hard to distinguish, because does that mean you handle it, you crush it, you succumb to it, or do you use it? I think a lot of people would mischaracterize crying as a stress response to succumbing to it, but really it's not the case. So we will learn. Now, next, how would you describe the way you handle pressure? You say, well, aren't stress and pressure the same? In so many studies that are and TED Talks that deal with stress, there seems to be this kind of common element that kind of gnaws at me, which is the conflation of stress and pressure. And so I like to borrow from physics to make this distinction, because I think when you distinguish between stress and pressure, it's wildly advantageous. And I've got some really good stories. Okay, so welcome. Hi. I'm not going to try to pronounce Abdurrachid. Hopefully I didn't botch that too badly. My screen is small to see the names. Okay. And then Michael says situational different techniques for different types of stress. And that's a really good point. And Jennifer says she uses it after she cries, she uses stress. And actually, like grief, there are many stages of handling stress depending on what we're talking about. So that's a really good Let's see what we've got here. I'm going to try to, okay. So here's my question. I am going to borrow this. I don't know the attribution. I can't remember the attribution, but this was a little, not study, but experiment, kind of mini experiment. A psychologist walked into the room and she held up a glass of water like this. So I'm holding up this glass of water like this. And what's your first thought? You think I'm going to ask you what? Is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? No, we're not that obvious. I'm going to ask a different question, which is, how heavy is this glass? So take your guesses on how heavy. This is just water, so no tricks there. How heavy do you think this glass is? So put your guesses in the chat, and then we'll come right back to it. As you put your guesses in the chat, Michael says pressure looked at as an opportunity is positive. Okay, maybe. Like pressure on carbon is positive because it turns into a diamond, which kind of hints at the physiological difference between the physics difference rather between stress and pressure, the energy difference between stress and pressure. And we say, I deal with stress by taking my attention off of it. Okay, and that's one way to do it. And okay, so Michael, who is always a good thinker, says this glass is getting heavier over time. And that's really kind of the point of this little, not experiment, but little talk that the psychologist gave, where she said that, if I'm holding this up for a minute, that doesn't really matter. But if I'm holding this glass like this for hours, that becomes a totally different proposition. And that, I think, is a good metaphor or initial kind of way to think about the difference between pressure and stress. Okay, so what is the difference between pressure and stress? I think it's really good to borrow from physics because it makes it clear. So high stress can seem like it comes from external causes, but it actually comes from your internal reactions to internal and external causes. So you can think of pressure as not entirely, but primarily external. So high pressure in physics is an applied force. So in this context, it's the force that makes you feel like you have to take immediate action, for example. So that pressure can make you feel like, or someone's holding a gun to my head, requiring me to hold on to this glass. And whether I get exhausted after 1 minute or after 1 hour will somewhat be determined by my internal reaction to stress, which is somewhat determined by how much I prepared for this type of stress, right? So if I have been doing arm exercises where I've been holding up dumbbells for the last 2 months, I might be in a little different position to handle the kind of pressure from being told that I have to hold it for an hour than before I had practiced those exercises. So the external pressure is the external force rather is the pressure, and our internal reaction to it is the stress. All right, so we've got a couple of people saying the weight of the glass depends on how long you hold it or how much you hold it. And Sanjay says depends on how long you're going to hold it. Exactly. And my ability to hold that is determined by some of how well I'm prepared and some physiological things. Maybe I'm naturally strong. Maybe I'm old and am frail, or maybe I have had diseases that I can't hold up my arm. So there's a lot of things that are internal that affect how stress is, or how pressure rather affects the internal reaction, which is stress. All right. So separating those two things out is actually good. And this is why I think thinking about physics helps. And there was a story, and I think I told this in the LinkedIn learning course, Decision Making in High Stress Situations, where we really make this distinction. But I tell this story, and in the course I call my friend Lily, in case she's watching in the course, so I'll just call her Lily. And she was feeling a lot of stress. It was, kind of during COVID, and she was between jobs. She's a freelancer. So in the course of one day, she was faced with two important decisions. One, she had to decide whether to take a gig overseas. Now, this was right at the early days of COVID, when a gig overseas was still a possibility. But she had to take it for a very reduced rate. Things shifted a month after this whole kind of stressful situation, but she also had to decide on an assisted care place for her mom. And she called me in a panic, a good friend of mine, she called me in a panic to say she was under a lot of pressure because she didn't know what to do. So I asked her, is it that you're under a lot of stress? Because it sounds like it, and I get it. Or is it that you are under a lot of pressure, like you have to make that decision right now? And I asked her this because time is the thumb on the scale for when we think we're under stress, and we attribute stress when it should be attributed to pressure. So she was able to take in this particular case, and it worked to her benefit because she wasn't unable to do the gig overseas due to COVID, but that was a kind of an extraneous situation. Now, there is another story that I think is really helpful. So I'm curious what you think about this. All right. Again, right before COVID, and I think this was in Northern California, the story made international news. A couple was lost in the wilderness, and a week goes by, and there's search and rescue and everything, and then the search turns into, like a rescue or whatever the search is when they don't think they're going to find people alive. But after 9 days, this couple comes out or is found in the wilderness, and they survived. And when they were asked, how did you do it with no food, no water? They said, we sang to each other. And everyone wants to know what songs did you sing? So we could say, oh, when you sing this song, you can survive in the wilderness for 9 days. That's how we kind of, correlation. We mistake correlation for causation. So a lot of social scientists came up and said, oh, singing happy songs or songs that bring you joy or songs that tap into your reduction of stress response, those kinds of songs, and when you sing them to each other. But what was missing from all of this is a really interesting element, which is the vagal nerve. So the vagal nerve really affects our fight or flight response. And there's a lot of evidence that gargling or humming or certain songs that produce that gargling or humming sensation stimulate the vagal nerve and can literally calm down the stress response. So I thought, well, rather than focusing on a song that might be good to reduce your stress, which is great, that'd be nice. Maybe the common element in those songs has something to do with stimulating your vagal nerve. So my question to you is, do you have a song, like a favorite song that you like to listen to reduce your stress? So you can put it in the chat, favorite song that you like to listen to reduce your stress. And would you consider the difference between listening to that song as a stress reduction kind of technique versus picking a song that may stimulate your vagal nerve to sing? And you might be a great singer like me. I'm not a good singer at all. So I don't know that if I was lost in the woods with any of you, me singing would help you survive. You might it would maybe help you survive. It probably wouldn't help me survive. Like maybe you'd want to kill me, but perhaps picking songs that stimulate that vagal nerve response. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to think of things that kind of beyond the storytelling and whatever is some physiological things that can affect your stress response, which definitely affects how the pressure is the same. You're lost in the woods, right? You're lost in the wilderness. Each day is the thumb on the scale. It gets more stressful and more stressful as the pressure becomes greater. Oh, wait, let's see. Jennifer says, Watermelon Man by Herbie Hancock. Okay, so do you like to sing it or do you like to listen to it? And I know Jennifer because I know Jennifer, and I know that she likes to sing, and she didn't put singing as a stress response. She cries, but I actually think that, there's a lot of evidence that singing, humming and gargling can reduce your stress response, regardless of the amount of pressure. Okay, I mostly use beach wave meditation. Fantastic. So when you are using beach wave meditation, are you listening or are you using your vocal cords at all? That's another question. And then connecting with nature is the best way to shake off stress. It's definitely a good way to shake off stress. But I think if you are connecting with nature, being lost in the wilderness for 9 days, that may change things. That may change that may become the difference between drinking this water and being forced to hold it up for a number of days. And Stephen says, for me, the most stress-reducing songs are instrumental jazz, but sometimes EDM and dubstep. Absolutely. And that is, again, the difference. A lot of people default to listening to music when they hear the story about being lost in the wilderness for 9 days. They're thinking, oh, that's a listening experience. But what it really could be, more than a listening experience, like if they had a radio that they could, listen to music, it may not have had the same effect, because the stress response with music is not exclusively auditory. It's also vocal cord stimulation. So be sure that even if you hate singing, when you are stressed, you understand that actually singing and stimulating that vagal nerve can be a huge thing. We've got listening to Gregorian chants. Oh, I totally agree. And I think probably doing those Gregorian chants have a doubling effect on stress reduction. Jennifer says, it doesn't have words. Normally I like to sing, but this song takes stress away. Okay, so the Herbie Hancock. But maybe you hum, and humming is definitely, stimulates the vagal nerve in a way that can reduce stress response. All right, so there is something else that needs to be kind of discussed and teased apart when you look at the difference between pressure and stress. Pressure can make you feel the need to do things and do things quickly. Doing things quickly is a completely reasonable response to pressure. So, and I'll give you some things that you might think about, maybe when if you're a boss, or if you experience some of those things, like maybe you feel your boss, or you are the boss, you're turning screws on delivery dates, or you're loading up extra work, or you're encouraging overtime, or you're getting angry when you're disappointed by your employees, or you're experiencing this as an employee. So either as a boss or as an employee, or you're noting when one subordinate's extraordinary achievements and praising it in the presence of others. A lot of times in competitive sales, you see, oh, where am I on the sales chart? Those are great forms of examples, of pressure. And that you see how that's different than stress. Those are great forms of pressure, expecting great things of all your workers, or railing against the apparent waste of time. I can't believe the amount of time you're wasting. Now, the stress response here could very well be you get more done. Like you experience the kind of loading on of extra work and you get more done. But there's something else. And before I get to the something else, there's another distinction that needs to be made. So we've distinguished between pressure and stress, and now we're going to distinguish between getting things done and thinking things through. So although we can force ourselves and push ourselves to get things done to a point, at some point we physically drop, or we mentally just break, whatever. But before we get there, or rather we can use pressure to do more work. But what we can't use pressure to do, and this is so apparent from so much of the research, is we can't think more. And therefore, pressure, the response to pressure, or using pressure for yourself or for the people, maybe if you're a leader, does not bode well for high-stakes decision-making. Because it seems to be, and there's some research around this, that the amount of thinking we can do, the amount of processing we can do is completely different than the amount of stuff we can get done. The amount of processing we can do, mental processing, is somewhat fixed. So what does that mean when you apply pressure to a fixed, when you apply pressure to to carbon, it turns into a diamond. But when you apply pressure to something that is not molecularly designed, kind of like our brains, to turn into a diamond under pressure, it breaks. So again, of course, there's a physical limitation, but pressure can push us to accomplish more, but it can't push us to think more. All right, so let's look at a few things. We've got anything Beyonce. So Derek says anything Beyonce. So Derek, my question is, do you listen and dance and move, or do you listen and sing along? That's my next question. I agree with anything Beyonce, except for a couple of songs, but most of her songs. It's less that than I hate singing and more that anyone, it's less that I hate singing and more than anyone in earshot hates hearing me sing. Oh, same. But then you can hum. Because when you are listening to music, you're only getting half of the benefit. You're getting this, but you're not getting the vagal nerve stimulation. So I promise if you sing, I'll laugh at you, but I will understand that it's great for stress reduction. Deadlines is considered as pressure. Yeah, deadlines are pressure. Deadline's not stress, because if you have a deadline that you can easily meet or you feel confident meeting, then there's no stress involved. Pressure is different than stress. And getting things done is different than thinking more. So there's limits to what we can do under pressure and high pressure. If you think you're going to create a high pressure situation for your team to make them make a better decision, it's probably not going to happen. You can press them to get things done, absolutely. And if you're doing this for yourself, if you're pressing yourself to get things done, and you're feeling stress and you're using that stress to fuel yourself, maybe like Jennifer, first you cry, then you get things, then you buckle up and do, that's okay. But if you're pressuring yourself, if you're putting all these pressures on to make a considered decision or to process the information more quickly, you're not going to end up with a better decision-making process. It just won't happen. So Derek says sometimes both. Yes. So he dances and he sings to Beyonce. I love it. I think that's the best. So anyway, all of the things that create pressure, hurry up, you've got to get moving. Great. You can get stuff done to a point. You'll have to watch the breaking point. But again, so why do you think that more pressure does not mean more productivity? I mean, you see people get stuff done in the short term. So doesn't that mean more productivity? Well, measuring our productivity on a quarterly basis can hide secret truths, which mean that the 1 quarter productivity over time with high pressure can lead to a net reduction in productivity over time. So again, the time that you measure is the thumb on the scale. So if you're measuring productivity for the quarter, you may see massive productivity correlate with massive pressure. But if you're looking at that productivity over the course of a year or the course of 3 hours of holding up this water glass, you might see that the net productivity is actually lower. And when that pressure is applied to decision making or cognitive kinds of things versus more getting things done, you will see there is no question that pressure, that increased pressure, will backfire. Oh, Afef, welcome from Tunisia. Welcome. All right, so welcome to the conversation about, I'm so glad to see you, about pressure and stress. All right, so if you're a knowledge worker, so you're not doing a lot of physical labor, but you're using a lot of this kind of machine up here, you're a knowledge worker, you cannot pick up the pace of mental discrimination just because you're under pressure. Chances are good that you're already thinking as fast as you can because you cannot voluntarily slow down your thinking that easily either. Meditation, who said that they're a big meditator? I can't remember who said that they're a meditator. I love that. Meditation can sometimes slow down your thinking, but you really can't just voluntarily slow down your thinking without taking measures to slow down your thinking. And pressure does not help you speed up your thinking. Obviously, fight or flight is a different story. You're not making a high stakes, you might be making a high stakes decision if a lion is racing at you and you make a decision to run. But if you forget everything that you learned about how to behave as a lion is racing at you and you just start running, maybe you get lucky and you outrun the lion, but maybe you don't. That doesn't mean that your decision process was good because you thought quickly and reacted and the outcome was great. Because as you also remember, good thinkers remember, and that's part of the Good Thinking Manifesto, between every decision and every outcome is a whole bunch of luck. So it's better to focus on your decision process instead of your outcome. And in doing that, requires you to distinguish between pressure and stress and the difference between doing and thinking. So those are some of the distinctions. Okay. Is there any correlation between pressure and stress? Oh, absolutely. Because we know when pressure is applied, stress is felt. Pressure is applied to carbon, the stressful response is to turn into a diamond. Some pressure is applied to us. A stressful response could be to cry or to fight anger, to use that to motivate yourself. Absolutely. And there are different forms of stress. There's eustress. Eustress is the positive form of stress. You're about to go on stage to receive a reward or award. And then there's distress, right? The bad kind of stress. And pressure can be correlated with both eustress, the good kind of stress, and distress, the bad kind of stress. So that's a good question. And then stress is built up over time, while pressure could be for the moment. Pressure can be built up over time too, actually. Pressure could be built up over time because, you're holding this, and I'm being held at gunpoint to hold this for a period of time. So the stress I feel in the first hour may be very different. I mean, obviously I feel stress from being held at gunpoint, but you understand, like, time is often the thumb on the scale. So stress and pressure is a matter of correlation or causation. It is, I think a better example of which is always a great question, a correlation causation question, is the people in the wilderness. Is the fact that they were singing a particular song and they survived in the wilderness causation or correlation? Like, everyone wants to know, what song were you singing? Like, that's some kind of magic that will be the cause of them surviving in the wilderness. Okay, maybe. But maybe a better question is, did the song have the kinds of elements in it that stimulated your vagus nerve? So that's the kind of thing it would be interesting to hear. Like the Gregorian chants, I mean, that is a key vagal nerve, stimulator. So that's going to be great for if you decide to actually do the Gregorian chants, not just to listen. All right. So then you start to see how this correlation is and causation. Pressure is definitely correlated with stress, but if the same pressure causes me stress and doesn't cause you stress, then, it's causal for one perhaps and correlated with stress in general, but not causing you stress. So it does depend on your relationship with stress. There are the limits to what we can do with increased pressure. And faced with added stress, we're not able, faced with rather added pressure, we're not able to accelerate our brains instantaneously. But there are some things that we can do when we're confronted with pressure to allow ourselves to not make that pressure influence our stress in a way that affects our decision making. And one thing we can do is eliminate wasted time. So if we're feeling a lot of pressure to get something done or think through a decision, putting off that decision can increase the amount of pressure that we have and can make the decision making process kind of unravel, because we're using this pressure, increased pressure, to make cognitive decisions. So eliminating wasted time, there goes my earphone, eliminating wasted time is one thing. And deferring tasks that are not in the critical path, which is another way of kind of eliminating wasted time. So when you have a decision to make, instead of doing all the easy little decisions that you think you can make, so putting off the big decision, putting off the thinking process, can create the kind of pressure, undue pressure, the time pressure when you are confronted with making that decision. So just separating, giving yourself more time, whether it's eliminating wasteful tasks or not putting off the high stakes decisions, is good. And the other thing you can do is just take more time, stay late. So just, I usually go to bed at 8. I'm not going to go to bed until I make this decision, whatever. And, that obviously, if you're tired, there's other physiological things, but the effects of these things, none of these things are that great. And the more you're a knowledge worker, the more you're using your brain, the more that sometimes you think pressure or this idea of resilience with stress is going to help me make a better decision. The science just isn't there. So maybe you need to hum. All right, a couple of other good comments that I want to bring in before we get to the final thing we're just about to wrap up If you do, so Hussein says, if you do not have more time and information and work under high pressure, your decision depends on your experience and leadership experiences to choose the most correct decision. Absolutely. And particularly, that's a really good point. And particularly if your experience involves having a very specific and well-researched decision process. And if you are interested, I'll give you a little hint for staying toward the end. Sometimes we give a little bonus, which is on my website, BeckySaltzman.com, BECKI, Saltzman.com. You can go and get yourself a free copy of the decision notebook, which will help make sure that you're not missing any kind of steps in your decision making and track your process separate from your outcome. And Teletubbies Tune Twister. Okay, that's a great YouTube moniker. Making the decision to not do the task, if that is an option, can eliminate the pressure. Absolutely. But that's a decision. So you still made a high stakes decision or an important decision. To not do anything is still a decision, as long as to not do anything doesn't become a default because you just didn't do it. But the way you're saying it, absolutely. It eliminates the pressure because you've made the decision. So that making the decision definitely is correlated with eliminating the pressure to make that decision. Kind of a circular thing. Anyway, so the whole point of this is that your thinking rate is fixed and your doing rate is not in the short term. But doing over the long term, unless you're, getting yourself in shape, has a diminishing pressure, has a diminishing return on investment. So here is the question. Would you rather install an update in your computer that fixes bugs and improves existing processes? So install an update in your computer. Hint, hint, we might be talking about this computer. I'm losing my earphone again. Or B, that's A. Or B, would you rather install an update that just makes everything run faster? So would you rather go A, update that fixes bugs and improves processes, or B, install an update that makes everything run faster? Okay? That is the question. All right, so if you are watching here on LinkedIn Live, Good Thinking, we're here every Monday, most Mondays rather, 9 a.m. Pacific time here in the US, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. We are also on YouTube Live at Becky Saltzman. You can go subscribe and hit that bell if you want notifications. But Jennifer says A. She would rather install an update that fixes bugs and improves existing processes. And we've got Derek says A. And I'm going to say A because I prefer to not just speed up the fact that how fast my brain crashes or my computer crashes. Fix the bugs. Go for the bug fix. Okay, so the bug fix is your decision process. Speeding up is pressure. Your bug fix is managing stress, how you manage stress. If you just want to speed things up, just crank up the pressure. But if you want to fix the bugs, you've got to work on the whole decision process and your response to stress. And when you separate pressure from stress and you stop trying to think faster, you start trying to think better, which is the definition of good thinking. And since you are good thinkers, that's what you've all said. We've said everyone says go for the bug fix. So that's what we're doing here each week on Good Thinking is we're just going for some bug fixing. I hope you have a great weekend. For those of you here in the States, enjoy your holiday. For the rest of you, enjoy your week as well. And we'll see you next Monday for a really fun show, 9 a.m. right here on LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live. Have a great week.